From Russia with Love is a 1963 spy film and the second film in the James Bond series, produced by Eon Productions, as well as Sean Connery's second role as the MI6 agent 007, James Bond. The picture was directed by Terence Young, produced by Albert R. Broccoli and Harry Saltzman, and written by Richard Maibaum and Johanna Harwood, based on Ian Fleming's 1957 novel From Russia with Love. In the film, Bond is sent to assist in the defection of a Soviet consulate clerk, Tatiana Romanova, in Turkey, where SPECTRE plans to avenge Bond's killing of Dr. No. The film followed Dr. No 1962 and was followed by Goldfinger in 1964. Following the success of Dr. No, United Artists greenlit a sequel and doubled the budget available for producers. In addition, the filming on location in Turkey, the action scenes were shot at the Pinewood Studios, Buckinghamshire, and in Scotland. Production ran over budget and schedule and was rushed to finish by its scheduled October 1963 release. From Russia with Love was a critical and commercial success. It took more than $78 million in its worldwide box office receipts, far more than its $2 million budget, and more than its predecessor, Dr. No, thereby becoming a blockbuster in 1960s cinema. The film is considered one of the best entries in the series, both by critics and general audience. In 2004, Total Film magazine named it the 9th greatest British film of all time, and was the only Bond film to appear on the list. It was also the first film in the series to win a BAFTA award for Best Cinematography. The cast includes Sean Connery as James Bond, MI6 agent 007, Pedro Armendáriz as Ala Karim Bey, head of the MI6 station IT in Istanbul. This is Armendáriz's last British film role before his death in June 1963. Lottie Lenya as Rosa Klebb, Spectre No. 3, a former Smash colonel turned Spectre operative. Robert Shaw as Donald Red Grant, a cunning Spectre assassin and one of the principal Bond enemies. Bernard Lee as M, Chief British Intelligence. Daniela Bianchi as Tatiana Romanova, a Soviet consulate clerk and Bond's love interest. Fleming based Romanova on Christine Granville, who was a Polish agent of the British Special Operatives Executive during Second World War. She became celebrated for her daring exploits in intelligence and irregular warfare missions in Nazi-occupied Poland and France. Bianchi's dialogue was dubbed by an uncredited Barbara Jeffert. Eunice Grayson as Sylvia Trench, Bond's semi-regular girlfriend, and Desmond Llewellyn plays Borthroyd, head of MI6 Q branch and the equipment officer. Following the financial success of Dr. No, United Artists greenlit a second James Bond film, doubling the budget offered by Eon Productions to $2 million, and approved a bonus for Sean Connery, who'd receive $100,000 along with a $54,000 salary. As President John F. Kennedy had named Fleming's novel From Russia with Love among his 10 favorite books of all time in Life magazine, producers Broccoli and Saltzman chose this as the follow-up to Bond's cinematic debut in Dr. No. The comma in the title of Fleming's novel was dropped for the title film. From Russia with Love was the last film President Kennedy saw at the White House on the 20th of November 1963 before going to Dallas, where unfortunately he would be assassinated. The film introduced several conventions which would become essential elements of the series. A pre-title sequence, the Blofeld character, referred to in the film only as number 1, though Blofeld is mentioned in the end credits with the actor labelled with a question mark. A secret weapon gadget for Bond, a helicopter sequence repeated in every subsequent Bond film except Man with the Golden Gun, a postscript action scene after the main climax, a theme song with lyrics, and the line, James Bond will return or be back in the credits. Although uncredited, the actor who played number 1 was Anthony Dawson, who had previously played Professor Dent in the previous Bond film. In the end credits, Blofeld is credited with a question mark. Blofeld's lines were redubbed by Vietnamese actor Eric Pullman in the final cut. Peter Burton was unavailable to return as Major Borthroyd, so Desmond Llewellyn, a Welsh actor who was a fan of the Bond comic strip published in the Daily Express, accepted the part. However, the screen credit for Llewellyn was omitted at the opening of the film and is reserved for the exit credits, where he is credited simply as Borthroyd. Llewellyn's character is not referred to by name in dialogue, but M does introduce him as being from Q branch. Llewellyn remained as a character better known as Q in all but one of the series' films until his death in 1999. Several actresses were considered for the role of Tatiana. Elga Gimba Anderson was nearly cast in the role but was fired after refusing to have sex with the United Artists executive. The 1960 Miss Universe runner-up Daniela Bianchi was ultimately cast, supposedly Sean Connery's choice. Bianchi started taking English classes for the role, but the producers ultimately chose to have her lines redubbed by British stage actress Barbara Jeffert in the final cut. The scene where Bond finds Tatiana in his hotel bed was used for Bianchi's screen test, with stunt actor Dawson standing in, this time as Bond. The scene later became the traditional screen test scene for prospective James Bond actors and Bond girls. In her initial scene with Klebb, Tatiana refers to training for the ballet, referencing the actress's real-life background. Mexican actor Pedro Armendáriz was recommended to Young by director John Ford to play Karim Bey. After experiencing increasing discomfort on location in Istanbul, Amadores was diagnosed with inoperable cancer. Filming in Istanbul was then terminated and the production moved to Berlin, and Amadores' scenes were brought forward so that he could complete his scenes without delay. Though visibly in pain, he continued working as long as possible. When he could no longer work, he returned home and took his own life. Remaining shots of Amadores left London as it had a stunt double and Terence Young himself as stand-ins. From Russia with Love is the first Bond film in the series, with John Barry as the primary soundtrack composer. The theme song was composed by Lionel Bart of Oliver fame and sung by Matt Monro, although the title credit music is a lively instrumental version of the tune, beginning with Barry's brief James Bond is Back, followed by Monty Norman's James Bond theme. In this film, Barry also introduced the persuasive 007 action music that came to be considered the secondary James Bond theme. Some interesting trivia notes. The building where James Bond meets Tatiana is called the Hagia Sophia. It was originally a church that was converted to a mosque in 1453. It was turned into a museum under the secular government in 1935, but became a mosque again in 2020. It is frequently featured in art history texts as an example of a domed basilica. A helicopter carrying director Terence Young during filming crashed over water, trapping him below the surface for a considerable time in an air bubble inside the chopper's canopy. He was rescued and then immediately went back to behind the camera with his arm in a sling. Daniela Bianca's driver fell asleep during the commute at 6 a.m. shoot and crashed the car. The actress's face was bruised and Bianchi's scenes had to be delayed by 2 weeks, while her facial contusions healed. Sean Connery has cited this film as being his personal favourite in the Bond series. The famous knife shoe used by Rosa Klebb was an actual weapon used by the KGB. Producers Broccoli and Saltzman, hoping to an end to the Cold War, did not want the main enemy to be Russian, so for the movie version, the nemesis is the fictitious criminal organization SPECTRE, seeking revenge for the death of the operative, Dr. No. The Ernst Stavro Blofeld character was allegedly named after Thomas Blofeld, with whom James Bond creator Ian Fleming went to school with at Eton College. Thomas was a Norfolk farmer, a fellow member of the Boodles, and the chairman of the Country Gentlemen's Association. His son is cricket commentator Henry Blofeld. Ernst Blofeld's date of birth in Fleming's stories is the same date as Fleming's own birthday, May 28, 1908. Now for me, this is one of the finest Bond films ever made, and it really does stand the test of time, because it has a fantastic story. The film is sharp, it's well paced, and it's a Cold War thriller that features some fantastic action sequences, especially when you take it in context of the time it was made. This for me is a tough, gritty James Bond film. And one thing I loved, it was free of the gimmickry that unfortunately would become a staple trope within James Bond films later on. For me in this film, Connery and Bianchi play real people. You start to care about them, you like them, and you actually hope their relationship works out. And Shaw and Lotte Lenya are splendid villains, and both have exciting, well-put-together fight scenes with Connery. What this film does is it never really slips into the fantastical side of the James Bond stories. It rather keeps it quite real and grounded, while still offering all the splendid Bond formulas, for example, action, gadgets, women, cars, etc., that all make Bond movies work so well. It's the pacing and the plot that's so good, along with a gallery of evil rogues, including Bond's ultimate villain, of course, Blofeld. For me, watching it, it's amazing that this film was made in 1963, and it just shows you good art never dates. This is one of the more intelligent Bond films, and it retains the substance of Ian Fleming's novel, although in the same breath toning down the Cold War politics of the time, including the Cuban Missile Crisis that only happened the year before. That's understandable though, the filmmakers didn't want to ruffle any feathers. I found it interesting that current Bond producer Michael G. Wilson has stated, "We always start out trying to make another From Russia with Love and end up with another Thunderball." Ironically, both Bond actors later on, Timothy Dalton and Daniel Craig, have considered this one of their favourite Bond films. This is a timeless classic that just seems to get better with age, and is definitely one of the most intelligent, well-rounded and well-told Bond stories out of them all. And for that reason, From Russia with Love gets a 9 out of 10.